Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast Mailbag edition on a Monday. We have arrived to Rivalry Week. Some people call it Hate Week. Oregon, Washington, top 10 showdown. First time ever in program history, or I guess series history, that these two teams are ranked inside the top 10. Game day is coming. Josh Pate is coming, which, by the way, we are efforting to lock this down to have Josh Pate return to the podcast this week. And so I have a feeling, Eric, you field the questions.
Yeah.
A lot of this probably has to be centered around this weekend.
Yeah, a lot of it is. I wanted to save some of the talking points to the back half once we get through some of the interviews with players and coaches on Oregon side. But yeah, it is a full Washington show to the break. After break, we'll get into some other stuff. But people want to know about this game. Shocker. Shouldn't surprise anybody as Matt ran through. There's a lot going on here, a lot to be excited about. I'm pumped. I mean, we're going up to Seattle on Friday, and that trip is always a fun one. And playing at Husky Stadium has not always been easy for Oregon, even though they've taken care of business for the most part. But should we jump right in, Matt? All right, we're going to jump in with a question from @DuckFanDan, first-time question asker, I believe, with just kind of a broad question to start our discussion between Oregon and Washington. He asks, what are Autzen Audibles' biggest concerns about Oregon's matchup with the Washington Huskies? Well, on defense, Oregon has to face, I was thinking about this morning, a similar receiving core as Oregon has faced over the years. And I think the two that stood out that are kind of comparable, 2019 USC with Pittman, with Amon-Ra. I think they had Drake London as a freshman. They also had Kyle, I can't remember that guy, the third, Tyler Vaughns. Tyler Vaughns was the other kind of big receiver. He hasn't had an NFL future, but the three of those guys are like legit star caliber NFL receivers right now. That was a pretty darn impressive group. Ohio State in 21. Same kind of deal. You look up at the NFL now, you look around, you go, I remember watching Olave. All these guys are studs. This is the best group, I think, since Ohio State in 21, and probably in that top three with this group that I've covered, or at least that I have had in recent memory. I don't know, Matt or Jared, or is there anyone I'm missing? Is there an obvious great receiving core that kind of deserves to be in this conversation? I can't really think of it.
I don't think so. These are different breeds.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like, didn't ASU have one with Ayuk and somebody else? But they aren't similar to what you just ran through and what this group is going to be.
Like, Oregon has certainly faced incredibly talented individuals, but to have a core where you have two, in this case, three guys that are like going to be NFL caliber talents and probably really good ones, that's just pretty unique. So that's the big concern, is you're facing up against a great receiving core that isn't just one guy's going to beat you. It's three guys that are capable of beating you. And I'll be interested. I don't know if I've seen what the updates are with McMillan and Adunze in terms of their health. I know there was some concerns there in past weeks. We can get through that maybe as we get into the week. But in terms of just a receiving core to face and then to match it with a quarterback as good as Penix, I think that's the one thing I was thinking about too, is obviously Ohio State had Stroud. So that's a quarterback that is, you're seeing what he's doing in the NFL, really talented. But then in USC in 19, it was Keaton Slovis, who he's playing on like his fourth team now, I think, at BYU. We discovered over like a couple weekends ago. So that's the other part, is they have this incredibly talented receiving core with a quarterback who can really get them the football. So on that side of the ball, I think that's really easy. That's the concern, because their run game is not something they really rely on hardly at all. It's this receiving game with those three players, with the quarterback, and they do utilize their tight end quite a bit in the red zone. So there's other guys to kind of be aware of. But on that side of the football, I think that's pretty easy. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to run through there?
Not specifically, no. I think it's just been the kind of same defensive concerns for the season, more or less. You feel good about the D-line. You just want to know if the secondary can handle its job in the back end. And this will probably be the best test of the season until they face USC.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a bigger test. I would throw out like a non-football-ish concern, and that's just the emotions of the game.
Yeah.
This is a rivalry. We've seen the back and forth from both sides on the field, the chippiness that usually comes out in this one. And it's going to be up at Husky Stadium. So that this is going to be an environment I think we haven't seen before. And all three of us have been to Husky Stadium. I think we've seen it hostile. I don't think we're going to see it anywhere close to what it's going to be on Saturday. And how does Oregon handle that? How does Oregon keep their emotions in check? Do we see personal foul penalties? I think we will see both teams commit personal foul penalties in this game. And honestly, the team that probably plays level-headed the most or consistently between the two will probably be the one that comes out of this victorious. Dan is very famous in paraphrasing, but just focus on the game. Don't worry about anything out beyond that. The team that does that is going to win. I'm real curious to see how Oregon handles it because at Texas Tech, what was there? 5 false start penalties on the offensive line. Now they haven't had many since, but they also haven't played in an environment that's even going to be close to this. I think Texas Tech was rowdy and raucous, but I don't think it's going to hold a candle to what Husky Stadium is going to be like.
I will say, it's also that good points there, Matt, in terms of just the environment. It's also the situation where, and we've talked about this a little bit, and Matt kind of touched on it with this being the first two teams, top 10 teams that playing here, is Washington hasn't really had, when Oregon has gone up there, a really, really dominant team, when Oregon has also had a really, really dominant team. Because you go back and you think in what was it? Was it 16? Yeah, 16 was the year 17 was the year Oregon went up and got thumped with Braxton Burmeister. That was a really good Washington team. That Oregon team was pretty bad. And then you go into 19, you go into 21. Those teams were like Oregon, I thought kind of clearly was better in both of those seasons going into the game. This is one where both these are top 10 teams. Washington is a slight home favorite, as you would expect. There's Washington, there's a lot of belief there, is kind of my point. Is Washington fans and the Washington team, they're really buying into this group. So, you kind of, that sort of, I think, accelerates some of that hostility, some of that belief within the fan base. Because there was a time there when Oregon was just dominating this series where you go up to Husky Stadium, and I think the fans there kind of were going, I don't really know. I know our team's playing better this year, but Oregon's beat us a dozen straight years. We're probably not pulling this one out. There's belief with Washington and that fan base right now that they can do something really special this year. So that also kind of adds to that environment component. And then I had one other just on-field thing. Braylon Trice as a pass rusher. I just wanted to throw that out. He's, to this point in the season, the best pass rusher Oregon has faced, I think, without question. I was looking at this. I was surprised. Washington is actually last in the Pac-12 in sacks. They've only had 6 so far. But Trice has 13 pressures. He's an NFL player. I think it's going to be fun watching him go against Josh Connolly, potentially a decent amount. But that one on that side of the football was just a quick matchup to touch on. There are probably other things, but I thought that was on face value one to point out early.
Yeah, that's a good one. I had the same thoughts just for the offensive concerns and rather than the defensive concerns. Offensively, you just need, and we'll get to some of this later, the guys who need to have a big week. You just need your big time guys to step up, and it's going to be difficult, like Matt mentioned, over the environment and just how hostile it's going to be. And Oregon hasn't played in that so far this year. Texas Tech was great, but it's not going to be what it is at Husky Stadium, which kind of goes into one of the biggest concerns is just not having a slow start. Oregon on the road, Tech, they don't get a touchdown in the first drive. They score on their second. It's kind of a wash more or less. But then against Stanford, they don't score for their first 2 drives in the game. And they only
get a
have
first
6
down.
plays. No, they don't. They only have 6 plays. And against Stanford, you can do that. Where the Cardinal only scored 6 points. But Washington, for as good as Oregon's defense has been this year, will put up points. It's not going to be again what it was against Colorado or against Stanford. This is going to be the best offense they play, maybe all year, but definitely them and USC are going to be the top 2. You need to get out to a hot start, start executing your plays at the right level, not running into pre-snap penalties and setting yourself back because those can ruin drives. That's one of my biggest offensive concerns. And then defensively, I don't think there's too much more other than the pass game. You just want to see your linebackers do well in zone coverage and then come down and stop the run. Washington last year ran the ball a lot more than I think we all had anticipated they would do, with good success. So I'm not sure if they'll try to do that again. If Washington's OC, if Ryan Grubb, I think it's Ryan Grubb, thinks that there's something that he could see that works against Oregon's defense rather than other teams that can't see it and doesn't work against Oregon's defense. So we'll see, but I expect them to go pass heavy, and that all comes down to what the secondary can do. And I guess just very, very last, just health, who is available by week. Didn't get to watch practice last week, so not 100% sure who came back, who is now out. So it's one concern you have going into the game, but that should be figured out by the end of this week.
That's a good point too, Jared, because we've heard from Dan the updates on Noah and Kyrie, and I guess you can throw in Andrew Boyle, but sometimes there are guys that we aren't aware were dinged up in a game that just aren't at practice that next couple of days, and we missed that last week. So there could be a player or two that is significant who just aren't there on Tuesday or Wednesday. Like, that's not something to totally be surprised if that's the case. As we know, Dan is not one to just volunteer injury information. All right, second one. Oh, did you have something, Matt?
No, go for it.
Okay. From at UO Life. Oh, sorry, UO for Life 84457. Defense has definitely improved from last year. Have they improved enough overall to be able to match up with the UW offense? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. It's the question of the week. This is the one, right? This is what everybody wants to know. Is Oregon really struggled last year against Washington, and almost everybody struggled against Washington. It's not like Oregon. It was like an isolated defense that couldn't stop Washington. Like, there's a reason why Washington this year is averaging like almost 450 yards through the air. It is a potent pass attack. It is, again, about as good as you're going to find. It is statistically the best pass offense in the country. It has, I think, pretty clearly three of the best wide receivers you're going to face. So this is going to be like a good on good matchup for Oregon perhaps here. And is Oregon's secondary that good? Like, are they capable of locking down this group? Like, you have to be impressed looking at since Colorado lost at Autzen, their offense has done some pretty decent stuff. Like, against USC, they needed a lot late to beat Arizona State. That was probably kind of disappointing. I don't think Prime was too happy, but that's still a pass offense that Oregon held 159 yards. It's gone out and thrown for, I think, close to 400 against USC and like 250, 260 or whatever it was against Arizona State. Can Oregon do the same kind of thing and take it away against Washington? Can they limit what they can do? I don't know. I think that's the big question. I'm optimistic. I've really been encouraged by what we've seen. But as we've been kind of saying, I think we pointed to this for a while of being like, this is going to be the real barometer game. Like, there have been great signs to this point of like, man, they did it against Colorado. That offense is actually pretty good. Who knows about Stanford, but they shut them down when they needed to. But this game, this is a different animal. And if they can go out there and have a dominant defensive performance and somehow, limit them to 28 points or something like that, that's going to be seen as a victory to me. So I don't know. That's the question for the week. I don't think any of us have an answer, but to me, that's the thing we're all kind of wondering going in.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, we've been talking about it for weeks now of what will this look like against a real quarterback or real offense and, above average competition that Washington is. I'll be interested to see, honestly, like what type of defense Oregon plays during the game, because for the most part, they've kept it kind of vanilla with their formations. They really just run nickel, and every once in a while they'll run a dime package just on like third down and long. Arizona had found some success the last 2 weeks against USC and Washington, running a quarter package, meaning so they have 7 defensive backs out in the field. I don't know if that's what Oregon goes to. They have to have a lot of faith in their defensive line to get to the quarterback, if that's the point, or if that's the case, is 3 down linemen, one linebacker, and 7 defensive backs. But Arizona did a good job. They held Washington to 38 points, which, again, I know that sounds like a lot, but against Washington, that's pretty good. And I know USC ended up scoring 43 points, but it took 3 overtimes to do so. So they found something there, and maybe that's a defense that Dan Lanning is looking at and maybe could implement. But I don't know. This is the question that we're all waiting for. This is potential, like Eric said, like good on good. And like Oregon's defense is significantly improved. Like the question asker was saying, The secondary is significantly improved. They're just faster. They're better fundamentally. They have more length. Will it matter? We're just going to find out on Saturday. Again, this is why you play the games. You think it could be one way and might end up being the other. So we'll find out on Saturday.
A lot of this will, I think, be dictated by Oregon's ability to get the Penix with or without a pass, without blitzing. Yep. If Oregon, if their front seven, if their defensive line is as good as we think it is as improved as we think it is, they should be able to, generate pressure with 4 or 5 guys. And if they can, that allows Oregon to do what Arizona did against USC and drop guys back and play that, dime defense. We're going to hear a lot of dime talk this week, I think, at practice, and kind of blanket cover the field and make passing lanes difficult. If they can't generate pressure with just their normal amount of guys, they're going to have to blitz, because you can't give Penix just 6 seconds back there to throw the football, because if he does, he's going to throw for 500 yards. Doesn't matter how good your defensive backs are. They can't cover that long. It just simple football. I also think Oregon's best defense in this game might be its offense. And do we see Oregon deploy a game in which they don't necessarily try and milk the clock from the very beginning, but do they run the football a little bit more if they have success on the ground? And do they try and string together some drives where it kind of like what Stanford used to do to Oregon, where, hey, we're going to ball control and we're going to take deep shots, but our bread and butter is going to be the run game, and we're going to have that clock always moving so that when your offense gets the ball, you're not in rhythm, you're potentially behind in the scoreboard, and when you get the ball for the first time, maybe there's 6 minutes left in the first quarter, and we've chewed up a whole bunch of clock. I think real curious to see A, how Oregon's defensive line plays, and B, if Oregon's best defense is just going to be their offense milking the clock. Because I don't think UW can do that. I don't think, like Jared said, they did run the ball more than we all expected last season, but I also don't think Oregon's run defense is as good as they were last year. And I think they're better than where they were last season. And I just don't see UW, running at will over Oregon. And they don't want to. They want to throw the ball anyways.
Right. No, that's fair. To the quarters or playing more defensive backs, I think Oregon has shown depth in the secondary, right? Like Steve Stevens has played really, really well as kind of an additional safety. Brian Addison, we're not sure his health actually. But like even last game, we talked about a little bit coming out of Stanford, how impressive it was to see Manning and Reed play really well on the outside in roles we hadn't really seen too much this year. I'd just be interested to see from a personnel perspective who's in that package if they do go and play 7 defensive backs, kind of what the formation looks like and how much that group can hold up. Because it seems, right, like Oregon has some depth back there and they've gone out and added through the portal, developed some guys. Seems like they could be capable of holding up, but that's the challenge, right? That's the challenge when you go against an offense like this with these kind of receivers. Is this isn't Stanford. These aren't, Nico Reed and Dante Manning kicked butt. I think I actually remember looking at a stat. I don't think they allowed a single reception in man coverage the entire game, those two. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that against Washington. And they're probably not going to be asked to, because you'd imagine you're going to see Kyrie and Jaleel play a lot, but you're going to see Nico Reed certainly play probably almost every snap like he has this year in the slot. So it's going to be fun tactically to kind of follow and see what Oregon employs there. And Dan said it many times before, it's a copycat sport. Like, how closely are they paying attention to Jared's point to Arizona and what they've done the last couple of weeks and at least slowing down some of these explosive pass attacks?
Oregon didn't have a single sack, and they only had 2 total tackles for loss last year against UW. Like, you can't do that again. You have to be better. And if you are, that's going to significantly impact things.
And Washington, similar to Oregon, has one of the better offensive lines in terms of pass protection. And part of that is Penix is similar to Nick's. Like, I think sometimes not that we give too much credit to the offensive line, but maybe we don't give enough credit to the quarterbacks. Like, these veteran quarterbacks have great pocket awareness and who also just like have a feel of where to go with the ball quicker than a younger quarterback. Like, that helps an offensive line. But Penix is, I think, similar to Nick's, like basically barely been touched most of the season. So if Oregon can get home, to Matt's point, that totally can be a game changer. I think that's probably a big point for both sides. Like, Washington hasn't really been able to get much of a pass rush, but if they get to Nick's a little bit here and Trice unleashes and beats Connerly or which side of the ball he's on, I could change things a little bit. That could slow Oregon down a little bit. They haven't really faced that so far this year. All right, third one from a familiar question asker at Ross_Maselich. What 3 players have to have their best games as Ducks in order to win? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. How do we want to do this? Do you just each want to go around and pick one and do like a little draft almost, or do we just want to each run through 3 names? I don't really care. I've got 3 names prepared. I'll just
we can go. Yeah, that's fine.
I'll just roll through my 3, and there's going to probably be duplicates. That's fine. I have Kyrie and Jaleel as corners, and then I have Josh Connerly as the left tackle just against Trice. I just think that's a matchup I'm going to be watching really closely. Josh has been solid. I don't think he's been challenged though. Like he will be this upcoming weekend. Again, like against an early, potentially an early draft pick in Trice. I haven't looked too close to see. Jared, you probably know better with the mock drafts. Think of Braylon, but I know he's a player that's certainly on radars.
He's up and down. Yeah, started the season high, kind of dropped a little bit. Just the production has fallen off.
Yeah, he has 1 sack, but he has 13 pressures in 5 games. I think I was looking at PFF. But yeah, then I don't even really say much more on Jackson and Florence. Like if those guys are out there against those kind of receivers, like it's a big deal if they can hold up in coverage.
Yes.
Sorry, Jared. What was your G's about? Was that something else?
Kickoff time for Washington State. For those listening, it just came in at 9:50 in the morning. 12:30 p.m. on ABC.
All right.
There'll be some more news to that from a basketball standpoint later that day, just as a tease.
Ooh, a little basketball tease. Okay, like that.
Am I going through my list now?
Yeah, go for it. I just want to make mine quick because I'm guessing there's going to be carryover.
Yeah, no. I actually didn't have a defensive back in mind, but I'm okay with it. I've got Connerly, I have Jordan Birch / Brandon Dorlus, and then I have Bo Nix. Connerly, for the same reasons as Eric, needs to show up against Trice, who's most likely going to be on the left side of the line or going against Connerly. That's just kind of where he lined up a lot last season. Dorlus and Jordan Birch, for obvious reasons, they need to get to the pass, or they need to get to the passer. They need to get to Penix. They need to cause havoc from both the interior and exterior of the line. Birch has been great this season. So is Dorlus at points. Like they need to show up and have a good day at the office. And then for Nix, I mean, this is a top 10 matchup.
Yeah, sure.
You need your quarterback to be as good as he can be. And not that Nix hasn't been good this season. He's been wonderful again. He had huge moments against Texas Tech. He's just got to come in through like that again. And you need him to have a great performance, or else, like if Nix is off, it's going to be a very difficult game for Oregon to stay in because Washington's just going to score points. Oregon obviously needs to score more points than the other team, and a lot of that has to do with how good Bo Nix can be. And so he just needs to have one of his best games as a Duck.
I'll go maybe just some other names beyond the popular ones because it's very obvious. That's the brutality of being third on this list.
Yeah.
I'll go Mateo and Blake Purchase because not only does Dorlus and Birch need to be play well off the edge, get pressure, but those are probably throw in Tuioti too. Just that group, those 3 guys. They're going to be playing a lot. There's going to be a lot of pressure on them to play well. And then my second one, or my second group, I guess, would be the guys beyond Kyrie Jackson at corner, and I want to throw in Brian Addison at safety if he plays. He's important from kind of blanketing the middle of the field with his size and his range. And then we've seen Jaleel Florence play quite a bit the first couple of games, and his snap counts have dipped a little bit the last couple of weeks. We've seen other guys like Dante Manning and Bridges get on the field a little bit more. It's just going to be a collection. Kyrie Jackson can't do it by himself. It's literally just, it's not, hey, Kyrie Jackson's healthy, Oregon's good, they're going to win because they've got a lockdown corner. And no, like that, they've got two other guys that are really, really good, and he can't cover three people at once. So your other corners are going to have to step up, and then your safeties are just going to have to make plays. There's going to be opportunities where a corner gets beat or they're playing zone and that soft coverage is there and the receiver finds a little hole and your safety's got to ball hawk it and get to the ball, whether it's tipping it, intercepting it, hitting the receiver at the catch, something. Safeties need to play big because they need to be that back end. So I would say the three freshman edge rushers and then whoever you have out there on with Kyrie Jackson against the passing attack.
I think that's good. I'll just throw like a bonus. You need probably one of your running backs to play, and I think they've both shown it this year that they're very, very capable, obviously. But to Matt's point earlier about maybe Oregon's best defense is its offense. If they can establish a run game here, that could be a difference too. And Bucky had an awesome game against Washington a year ago. I've said a couple of times, he shows up in the big stages and plays his butt off. I think he will again, but I don't know if you need like the all-time greatest Bucky game to win necessarily, but you do need that component to be firing as well, I think, to pull this one off.
All right, 3 questions in. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and wrap up the show. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles Podcast. 3 questions in, 2 more to go. With a recruiting toss late on the pod.
Yeah, I figured we'd do a little recruiting talk. There's been some news here. Actually, we should probably expand that question because I think that question might have been asked before a certain piece of news broke, kind of late-ish Sunday.
Yeah.
So we should probably add that to that. But first, we're gonna do one kind of season review-ish question. Maybe this is kind of a carryover from the bye week, but from @PrincePuddles, he asks, "Who are your didn't see that player coming players this year? Players you didn't expect to play as well as at the start of the season, and guys you expected more from to start the season that have underperformed or not played." #Autzen Audibles. Figure we'll run through this quickly. There's some kind of names we haven't talked about in this regard to me a ton. In terms of guys that I didn't see coming, offense, I wrote down Marcus Harper. I say that because I had felt when they added Angilau and Strother through the portal that one of those guys was going to end up pushing him aside as a starter and make him kind of a key interior reserve player. The fact that he's been the starter all along, and those 2 other guys have played 18 snaps, I think, so far, kind of surprises me a little bit. Obviously, Harper played pretty darn well a year ago. Liked the player a lot. I just thought, hey, they went out and added 2 guys, and Strother's just getting healthy now. Maybe things change, but it really feels like Harper is kind of in for the long haul here. So that one surprised me a little bit. Defense, kind of a similar deal. Steve Stevens. It's a guy who I had kind of, I won't say written off, but really wasn't sure what his role would be. And he's played his best football of his career. And I think has looked a little bit more, I don't want to say explosive, but certainly hasn't looked as athletically challenged as he did a year ago. This is going to be a big test this week to see, though, how much they can utilize him. But he's actually been, according to PFF, one of their better defensive backs, which was not something he was a year ago. And after they added all this talent, I didn't think he would be. And then I'll do 2 quick on offense. These are guys that have not really made impacts, and these are pretty straightforward because these are just guys that aren't playing. Chris Hudson, didn't think he would play 22 snaps at this point. He played over 500 snaps each of the last 2 seasons. Didn't expect him to be a starter this year. I think I had him as a backup, but certainly didn't think he'd be totally out of the rotation. And then similar story, Mace Funa on defense. He's played 56 snaps in 5 games. He'd played more than 300 in each of the 4 previous seasons. So that one kind of surprises me a little bit, especially because it's those true freshmen who pushed him aside. So there's my 4 names that I came up with for this.
I will do. I don't know about you, Matt, but for the underperformers, those are my picks as well. I don't really know if I have an obvious other answer, really. I think everybody's been about where I expected them, or maybe even a little bit higher. So I'll skip those for now. My offensive player, didn't see that coming. I'm going to go with Johnny Cornelius. Not because I didn't think he would be good or that I didn't know what he was going to be coming into the year, but he's been great as the right tackle for Oregon. He's been extremely athletic. He's been big and physical. He's been able to push people out of the way and just honestly do his job as a tackle. Get outside on the perimeter. He's incredibly athletic for his size. I just didn't really know how the skill level would translate from going to playing at Rhode Island to coming to Oregon. Like, he looks great in his Rhode Island clips, but then you're thinking, well, he's going against people who are playing Rhode Island. Like, that's not the best competition in the country.
Right.
You know, no disrespect if you're playing against Rhode Island this upcoming weekend, but when you play against Oregon, you're just a better player on the opposite side. And he's been spectacular this year. That really hasn't been a worry. I don't even know if he has more than 3 penalties on the season. He's just been great overall. Defensively, Tatum Tuioti, and that's a kid.
Yeah.
4-star recruit coming out of high school, coach's kid. So you're not exactly sure, like, is he really this good? Is it more of like, oh, he's a coach's kid, like he's fundamentally strong, so he just dominates at the high school level? We saw him in fall camp, and a lot of people were raving about him. And it's like, okay, is this just like how people raved about Damon David when he was a freshman? And it's just like these
Right.
fall camp series where it's like, oh, he's been pretty good, blah, blah, blah. But no, I mean, as soon as he's been healthy, he's been an intricate member of this defense. And to Eric's point about Mace Funo, like Tatum Tuioti and Blake Purchase, 2 big surprises, have just completely taken the snap count away from him. And then you watch Tatum play, he gets a sack against Colorado. He's pretty good in the open field and like coverage situations. I never expect an outside linebacker of his size or Mace Funo's size to be great, like a great coverage guy, but he's able to move his feet. He's able to turn his hips. He's able to get out there and at least make it complicated for an offense to go and try to attack him. So I think he's been really good out there. He and Purchase are 2 of my biggest surprises just because of I really liked Blake Purchase coming into the season. He was one of my highest guys in the recruiting class, but I just didn't know if he would basically play this much. And he has, and he's played well. So Tuioti's my answer there. And then Hudson and Funa as the underperformers.
Yeah, I've got the same thing for underperformers. I'm going to throw out Jordan James. Yeah. We all knew he was good, but he's expanded his role and he's thrived in it. He's 3rd in the country in yards per carry this season, 8.74. He's tied for 11th in the country in rushing touchdowns this season with 7. And if you were to say, like, hey, like, if he had a normal amount of carries, just 34 carries for Oregon this season. The leader right now is Kamani Vidal of Troy, who has 835 total yards on 131 carries. If you took Jordan James's like yards per carry and just cut it by a yard, he would have over 900 rushing yards if he had the same amount of touches as Vidal did. He is producing at an all-time high for him, short career, but really, really good. Really, really good. And I don't know if I expected that this quickly. I thought he'd be a 3rd down back, short yardage guy like they were going to use him last season. And he's more than that. I think he's probably better than Noah Whittington right now. And Noah's going to come back at some point next season, and he's going to have to compete for that starting job if he comes back, I guess. Defensively, I was going to say Tatum. I'll throw out Cole Martin and probably Jalil Florence as well. Neither guy. Florence didn't play much last season. He played in every game, but it wasn't a lot of snaps. It was primarily special teams. He's looked really good in a couple games. And then Cole Martin's just a freshman. And I just didn't figure he was going to be we saw some stuff during spring ball in the spring game, but I just didn't think he was going to be a guy that would be beyond special teams. Looking at who they had on the roster and the positions that he's playing as well, I just didn't think he'd be a regular rotation guy on the defensive side of the football.
In a really crowded defensive backfield too.
Yeah.
Another guy, Bryce Betcher, Just got to give a shout out to my man's.
Mm-hmm.
Big surprise. I think he's probably the biggest surprise in the team, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody at all, including me, saw that coming where he'd be an intricate part of their defense as well. So just a shout out to him.
And it's notable with Bryce that, you know, he got the opening game start. And you kind of thought, oh, that's exciting. But I don't know if we expected necessarily that that Bryce would continue to be this involved in that linebacker rotation. Like it's not like his snap count has just completely fallen off over the course of the last couple of weeks. Like he's continued to play a lot. All right, last one from @QuackAttack74. What are the chances of Oregon being able to flip Elijah Rushing since he decommitted from Arizona and get Aiden Breland to commit this weekend? Autzen Audibles. Matt, we'll throw it to you, and then maybe we can jump into the most recent commitment, which Oregon landed on Sunday as a pretty big junior college ad.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you like your chances right now with Rushing. I mean, Blair and Steve Wiltfong immediately put crystal balls in late Sunday night. If you missed that, Oregon was probably the second choice when he committed to Arizona back in the spring/summer. We all knew Oregon wasn't going to stop recruiting the players that, you know, the 5 stars that commit elsewhere, and they haven't stopped recruiting with Elijah Rushing. They were at one point viewed the favorite. And so this is just the natural, progression here. Oregon's guys are, at that same position are doing a really good job this season. Dan Lanning's defense has made a jump. I think you look at the fact that Oregon is really, really good this season. And while Arizona has improved, it hasn't translated to wins yet. They've been really close. They should have won at USC. They could have won, I think, at Mississippi State earlier this season. It just hasn't translated, though. And I don't know if you guys read his message or not, but he definitely was like, I'm paraphrasing, but he took some shots at Arizona on his decommitment, and it was kind of you don't see that very often. About how his development, he felt like wasn't going to be where it needed to be if he went to Arizona. I would be, I don't want to say like guaranteed that he's going to commit to Oregon, but it looks like it's going to be a pretty big shock if it doesn't happen at some point. Now Breland, this goes back and forth. Like, you read the reports from our national guys, you read the reports from the Georgia side, and it feels like it's gone back and forth every week. I still maintain distance usually wins out in these scenarios. And he's a West Coast kid. So maybe Oregon's success up front again this season. They've got a lot of guys that could be gone after next season. We know Dorless is gone. We know Popo's gone. Taki's gone. There's going to be some other guys in that group that could probably either they go pro or they choose to transfer, or maybe they're just done playing college football. Like, I think all 3 of those scenarios are probably possibilities for some guys. The door is open for a freshman, even though they loaded up last season, to enter fall camp next year with a legitimate chance to play. So I think, maybe things are going towards Oregon's way. His date of commitment, the 14th, that feels very orchestrated in Oregon's favor. I don't know Breland, but that's a very random date. He didn't say it's his mom's birthday or grandma's birthday or, some significance. Maybe it is. Maybe we find out on the day of his announcement. But it just feels very coincidental that the day Oregon plays Washington, Breland's also going to be making his commitment.
Could be pretty good news that day. If that could be a pretty good day if everything goes to plan. If your intuition is correct there. I just had one thought on this that I wanted to add, and then we can talk more about Sione Lalea. I'm not sure entirely on that pronunciation, but I think I'm close-ish. Just that I was watching, I don't know if you guys watch this or not, but Adam Brenneman had Dan Lanning on for like a 51-minute, near hour-long podcast interview late last week, and I went and listened to that over the weekend. And he talked about kind of prep recruiting and the value, especially on the defensive line, that's a developmental position that they want to try to recruit in big numbers to develop. And you can see what they did last class. I think we've seen incredible returns immediately, as we talked about. But then the long-term perspectives of once they do get like Johnny Bowens and Mikael Gardner and Terrence Green and all of these guys start to kind of develop and play roles in future seasons, you can see that Oregon is obviously quite aggressive recruiting up front on defense. If they're able to land Rushing and Breland with what they've already done in this class, especially at linebacker, like you can see that the front seven on defense is clearly an area, and it's not, I'm not breaking any news here, but clearly an area that Dan thinks that it's valuable to hit the preps really hard, because he did say that there are position groups like you maybe don't see that much development. So there is more value in just going and pulling a portal kid or two. So but that was kind of an interesting sort of subplot that Dan shared on that podcast interview.
I mean, it makes sense. It's what Georgia did. It's what Georgia continues to do. It's a very recent example, but Georgia literally went from Jordan Davis, who was a first-round pick, to Jalen Carter, who was a first-round pick. And now both are on the Eagles, coincidentally. But that's the point. It's like, oh, no, we lose this guy? Okay. Like, he was great for us. That's great. Like, he's going to be a first-round pick, or he's going to be drafted, or whatever the case may be. But, like, we're okay with who we have behind him because we've developed the talent to do so. And like Eric was just saying, Oregon brought in 1 million defensive linemen last year, who a bunch of them were 4-star recruits. A couple are more developmental guys like Tavita Pomey. But you already see them making an impact. I mean, Popo Amalvi doesn't really play that much against Stanford, and Amari Washington is like one of the first interior defensive linemen to really come off the bench, who's out of the defensive line rotation. Right. Looked good. And very, very, very limited snaps. Like, reminder, limited snaps. A lot of these guys have looked pretty good. I mean, again, they're all at the end of the game. They're limited snaps, but like you can see dudes like Terrence Green or Mikael Gardner, Johnny Bowens, like Amari Washington, as we just mentioned, like they pop a little bit. There's these little moments. And again, we don't see this, but every day those guys learn from Tosh Lupoy and Dan and guys that they play with in practice and to get better and better and better. And that's what Dan is hoping to do again for this class. It's not only just Elijah Rushing and Aiden Breland, but Jericho Johnson is another defensive lineman that we should mention from Armio High School in Fairfield, California. Like, he's a dude, and he's honestly one of the wants that I have in this class. Like, he's a big kid. He's like 6'4", 300 pounds. He's an interior lineman while Rushing and Breland. Breland's more interior, but he's like doorless, kind of that defensive end role. Could slide outside, could slide in. Yeah. Jericho Johnson's an interior kid. And I think it's really important to find guys who can not only stop the run in the interior, but also pass rush. Like, think of Popo, think of Casey, Taki, especially this year, have been able to do both. Like, those guys are hard to find. California native, coming down to seemingly Oregon, Washington, USC, had a trip to Oregon, I think, against Colorado. So that's another guy that you can add to this list of, hey, Dan is trying to reload the defensive line after losing a lot of these kids. It's like, oh, well, he's just going to go potentially get 2 5-stars and a highly rated 4-star to do so. Like, this is why Dan Lanning was brought to Oregon. I remember the sky was definitely falling when Elijah Rushing originally committed to Arizona. This is recruiting. As much as it hurts to say, but like, these are 17, 18-year-old kids making a decision. Yeah. And they're incredibly important decisions, and these are decisions that the parents are going to think about, that the kid is going to think about, and ultimately, like, sometimes they decide to decommit, sometimes they decide not to. But there was no reason for the sky to fall originally, and now, I mean, obviously, you can see why. Like, you're going to have to. This is the blind faith that I've talked about on this podcast before with Dan and the company. Like, you have to trust them kind of blindly at points with their player development and player evaluation to know who's it going to be that they're going to go after the most. And no surprise that they're going after a couple 5-stars and a high 4-star, but this is part of the process. It may look bad in June, but signing day, this is all over message boards. Signing day is in February. There's a lot of time between then and now.
I think it was either here or in the Thursday Quack Chats that we do. I brought up the fact that I was more interested in seeing the flips that Oregon was going to try and get.
Right.
And, I didn't specifically have like names in my head, I was predicting, but like, this is a perfect example of it. And we're starting to get to that point now in the year where, like to Jared's point, signing day, the first one, is almost 2 months away. And there's going to be a lot of kids that are out there, a lot of parents that are out there going, did we make the right decision based off of what we've seen through the first half of the football season? And we've only got 6, 8, 10 weeks to go until we have to put pen to paper and make this like definitively official. Are we certain with our decision? Or if there's any doubt, we probably should open things back up again and check out some other schools. We've seen it with McMillan, Elijah Rushing. We've seen it with Jeremiah McMillan, the receiver from Ohio, who's committed to Ohio State. He was out here for an official visit, I think, for the Colorado game.
Yeah, I think so.
So, like, there's 2 guys that Oregon's going after that have committed to other schools or have now decommitted. There'll be more. I guarantee it. It'll also happen to Oregon. We'll see a couple guys that are on this commit list to Oregon that will all of a sudden pull back. And that's just the name of the game, these days. And the flip season for the next 8 weeks will really shape where this class goes. 23 guys currently committed. They're 13th in the country. You add Elijah Rushing, you add Jericho Johnson, like Jared said, and you add Breland, and you're probably somewhere near the top 5. Probably not in the top 5, but you're probably really close.
And you'd have a
number
clean
4.
Oh, Matt,
number 4.
Jared's already done it.
Did the math. Yeah, number 4.
I was just going to say, and almost not more importantly, but quite importantly, you'd have a clean sweep with all the top front 7 or defensive line-ish kind of guys, including Rushing there as an edge guy. You'd have
out west,
the 3 best out west. Exactly. Yeah, you'd have, and that's important, especially when you're recruiting now going to the Big Ten to get those types of bodies, because there just aren't that many out west. And you're also means that USC, Washington, UCLA, in theory, don't have those same type of players from this class. So it's kind of a double win. I forget somebody said that on our podcast. One of our recruiting and analysts, I think, came in and said something. So it might have been Cooper Patagna. I can't remember, but yeah, that would be huge if that plays out. I don't know, but Matt, do you feel like fairly confident that something like that could happen, or are we blowing too much smoke? I don't know. Should we hedge bets?
No, I think it's a very real possibility. I mean, the fact that Wiltfong and Blair both like within minutes of Rushing's decommitment,
right?
Placed crystal balls for Oregon. Like
it was before, actually. It was 20 minutes before.
Yeah. So like that tells you a lot right there. The Breland one is the one I'm with Jared. I think Jericho Johnson will be close to Oregon. He's a good dude. I think good player. I think Oregon probably leads there. Breland's just the one that you just don't know. But because there's been a lot of, well, it's Oregon, now it's Georgia. Well, now it's Oregon, now it's Georgia. And that could just be posturing. I don't know. But again, October 14th, that feels very coincidental. That's the one guy though that I feel like you look at and say like, man, maybe Georgia could swoop in. And look, if something changes and he goes to Georgia, like, can you blame him? To Jared's point, like they produced, 2 first-round draft picks, same position in 2 years. Their D-line is nasty. Their defense is nasty. And if he goes there, he goes there. And that it would make total sense. It would be hard to say no to Georgia, knowing what they've done the last couple of seasons and what your future could hold. But Oregon also in a good spot. So I think it's realistic, to answer your question.
Okay. Do we want to touch slightly on the junior college commitment yesterday, the number 1 JUCO? I think we have to.
Yeah, 6'4" corner, San Mateo, that produces a lot of players every year. Miami, USC were finalists here along with Oregon. I don't know if you guys watched his commitment, but like really cool to see how like the community around him supported him and how thankful he was for that. I mean, the commitment was like 7 or 8 minutes long until he actually announced it, because he just really wanted to thank so many people for their help. But He specifically said, like, Demetrius Martin, Oregon's cornerback coach, the development he has done with Christian Gonzalez and now with Kyrie Jackson really stood out to him. And those are two guys that are taller-ish corners than the normal standard that we've seen at the position. It's changing, but still 6'3" corners are different. And Sione is 6'4". I wonder if this is like an indication that Kyrie's probably gone after this season, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But he highlighted that, and then he also highlighted Tosh Lupoi's ability late to close the deal for Oregon. We hear a lot about Tosh's exploits on the recruiting trail, and this is just another one of those that you get. Gives you depth at worst case scenario, and probably a guy that's a potential starter next season if as good as advertised.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it necessarily has to indicate anything with Kyrie, but if it does, this is a guy who could be a candidate to start next year. There's also several guys that have eligibility that could return, and there's also the transfer portal. So if Kyrie is not on the roster next year, which I don't know, there hasn't really been any indication of that. He's played really, really well. I'm sure he's skyrocketing up. I'm sure NFL scouts are taking notice, I should say. But like if he does take off, like Oregon has a potential starter here. If he doesn't, Oregon has another really good depth piece who could push to start opposite of him, right? I mean, I think that's the thing we've seen is Triquez returned as a full-time starter this year, and he's been pushed down the rotation. It's not to say I think that would happen necessarily to Jaleel or something, because Jaleel's a younger player who's, I think, developing into a very good corner. But if Sione shows up and he's the second best corner, he's going to be treated as such. So I think this is a really exciting addition. And I believe only the second junior college player Oregon has picked up under Dan, along with George Silva. I was just looking through that. I was trying to remember if there was anybody before that, but I don't think so. So Oregon doesn't go JUCO all that often under Lanning. I think in part because you can hit the portal and get similarly aged players who are also maybe a little bit more advanced physically and have played at this level before. But when they do, it seems like I don't know. I guess we can't really say George has been awesome since he hasn't really played, but they've been selective, and it seems like they obviously really like this player. And who wouldn't? He's literally the top-rated junior college player in the country, so it's probably hard to argue against taking a player of this caliber.
Yeah, very difficult to argue about taking him. The 6'4", 185 cornerback, like ideal. It's very similar body build to Kyrie Jackson. I don't remember what Kyrie is listed at on his Go Ducks profile. In the article with Brandon Huffman of 24/7 Sports, Sione says that he's coming in early. He's enrolling in January, so he's getting here as soon as he can, which has always helped. You look at the development of Cole Martin and Tatum Tuioti, like a lot of that goes into knowing the playbook, getting here in January, and then playing. And then some of it is a coach's kid, so they are very fundamentally sound as compared to others. But Sione is going to have a chance to start. I truly think so. And I'm with Matt. I think Kyrie's gone regardless of at the end of the year. He's shown a lot in his 1 year at Oregon, and I think that's going to be more than enough to get drafted. Where that is, I don't really know, but long, tall, athletic, cornerback, like physical as well. Like those are some really good traits that a lot of teams would like. So he's going to have a moment to come in and immediately play. I know that Oregon, if they don't feel like they have a real corner, will more than certainly go after one in the transfer portal. But Sione is going to be a real option. College of San Mateo, Bennett Williams was a College of San Mateo kid as well. I think Oregon had maybe one more from there. I don't remember off the top of my head, but real program, like Matt was saying earlier, they produce a lot of talent to Division I coming from the JUCOs, kind of like a minor league system there. I like his tape. I think it's really good. I think he's another guy who's a little bit more physical than you would think as like a West Coast kid coming out. But I think he's going to help tremendously next year. And to have this is clearly the I don't know how to describe it. The type of cornerback that Oregon wants, like long, tall, physical. And he perfectly fits the mold. He's going to look very similar to Kyrie out there, just with his length and his height at the cornerback position. So I'm interested I mean, if he signs, we'll see him in January. I'm interested to see how it'll look then. But I like the commitment, and obviously, honestly, taking the number one junior college player in the country is never really a bad thing. So you take that all day.
Kyrie is 6'3", 195. So very similar body type.
Yeah. So inch taller, 10 pounds lighter.
I don't think Kyrie is definitely gone. I just think it opens the door that this is probably a real possibility, because why would Oregon target a JUCO guy, and why would a JUCO guy look at Oregon knowing the positions and the guys that they have currently on the roster?
Sure.
But to Jared's point, like, I do agree. Like, he's playing well. It's tough to turn down if the NFL is there, and it's gonna, I don't think he's a first rounder yet, and it's probably gonna dictate, whether he stays or goes. Is, hey, like, right now you're a 6th rounder, a 5th rounder guy. We feel like you'll get drafted, but if you come back and do X, Y, Z, you become a first rounder. Like, that's probably going to be what happens here. Just, does Kyrie get past that threshold where it's more valuable to return or not? And that's probably going to happen.
Problem for Kyrie is he's already old. And I use old in air quotes. Like, if he returns for another year, I think he's going to be like 23, maybe even 24, depending on when his birthday is. So he's playing great this year. It's just my thoughts that he's gone because he's going to be he's already showcased how physical and talented he can be, and he doesn't want to get another year older. So if someone's like, hey, we'll take you in the 4th or 5th round, like, I think I'll take that all day. But that's just me. And I also think his skill level can translate to the NFL. He just needs to be heavier. 195 won't cut it.
Yeah. To bring the podcast full circle, in terms of boosting draft stock, this weekend's a really good opportunity for Kyrie to potentially do that. So
100%.
A lot of eyeballs too.
Yep. All right, it's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Thank you for submitting your questions. Look forward to talking more Oregon at Washington throughout this week. Look for more podcasts coming your way there. And also go to duckterritory.com for more coverage of the matchup for pregame, in-game, and post-game coverage. All three of us will be there from Husky Stadium, 12:30 kick. Until then, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.